Welcome one, welcome all. It is Tuesday, April 4th. Thank you, Bear. 2023, the first Tuesday in the month of April. It is 7:02 p.m. Central Standard Time, which means it is time for our weekly Blog and the Boys Roundtable here on the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel. Make sure you do subscribe. You can watch us live, of course, if you are here at 7:02 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can catch the rewatch at your own convenience, or you can, of course, listen to this show on the Blog and the Boys Podcast Network. Subscribe, leave a rating, write a review. We have a lot of fun in store for us over this month with the 2023 NFL Draft, getting closer and closer with every passing moment. My name is RJ Ochoa. I have three fantastic BTBers with me tonight. You can see them, hear them, read them all throughout the Blog and the Boys universe, making his triumphant return, perhaps to steal the Blog and the Boys crown that is currently on the head of Danny Phantom. It is Tom Ryle. Speaking of his head, Tom, I believe you have a story with something that is atop your head this particular evening. You are on mute, so great start for you, Tom, as far as points are concerned in winning tonight.
Yeah, there it goes. Hey, yeah. My stepdaughter likes to go and look for little finds, and she's always picking up stuff. And she came in the other day and said, "Here, this is a hat that's been autographed by Jay Novacek." And he was
sweet.
a guy I got to interview back in the early days at Blogging the Boys. So, in addition to the fact that he was one of my favorite players when he was with the Cowboys, I just thought that was really sweet. And I thought, what a perfect piece of headgear for our little blog here.
That's awesome. Well, Kevin has given you 5 points just for it being a camouflage hat. The podcast audience obviously cannot see it. It is a camo base hat. It just happens to have Jay Novacek's signature, not hiding, in the camouflage, but nevertheless, it is camouflage. David has said beard game on point. I guess, Tom, you got more of a goatee going on, Tom. Tony, you've got a pretty stout beard. Brandon, you look pretty clean shaven, like a nice, trim looking beard. So good for you. We'll get to your overall head hair situation in a moment, Brandon. But Tony, speaking of heads, yours just wearing a stupid cap. I mean, you don't have a Jay Novacek hat, but you are on brand wearing a Blog on the Boys hat. You did a great job hosting the roundtable last week, fighting the internet gremlins. But you are here live and live in color. How does it feel now? Do you feel safe and secure with your internet situation?
I say that, and then that's when it'll cut out. So yeah, I feel good for right now.
Okay. Well, do you think that David was talking to you with the beard game on point comment?
You gotta be. I mean, I keep a good beard, I think. So yeah, maybe.
Okay. Brandon Clements, you are the fourth horseman here tonight. My first question to you, are you planning on seeing the Super Mario movie as soon as it is out in theaters?
Absolutely. I don't know if it's as soon as it comes out, but it's definitely on the list.
Okay. Well, so I mentioned it, Brandon. You've been telling us, you've been tweeting about this on social media. Let everybody know what's going on. The podcast audience cannot see, but your head is cleanly shaven. At this point, it's been a few days. So, some stubble kind of, I don't know if it's called stubble on the top of your head. But either way, some growth is on the way back. Just let us know what's going on, Brandon, and where everybody can support the cause.
Yeah, so this past Sunday, locally here in upstate New York, I shaved my head for a great cause, St. Baldrick's, which is to help fund research for children's cancer. So that's what I did. So I had a little. It was getting a little messy on top. I usually don't grow it out too long, but I had to. I did it for a great cause. We raised some money. My teammates did a great job, and all the great folks at St. Baldrick's. They do a heck of a job locally and across the country. So everybody's pitched in. I know a lot of our BTBers have pitched in one way or the other. So I'm just thankful for all the support, and I'm excited to do it every single year.
That's awesome. Well, everybody head to Brandon's Twitter at Icebreaker21. You've tweeted out the link several times. You can do it again as soon as the show is over, so everybody can head over there and it'll be fresh on the timeline. Great job, Brandon. Tonight, I saw the comment section kind of a little bit confused. So, guys, let's get it together. All right, we're getting close to the draft. Everybody needs to kind of be dialing it in. And I'll be honest, it's kind of a bit of a lull, even in the draft season, right? Like the draft is almost 3 weeks away at this point in time. We're starting to see 30 visits trickle in. We do have a tracker up on the homepage at bloggingtheboys.com if you want to see which players have recorded official visits with the Dallas Cowboys. Tuesday was all about TCU offensive lineman Steve Avila. I think we would all be thrilled if the Cowboys wound up with him in the second round. There are a lot of people who would feel comfortable with the 26th overall pick. That might be a little bit too rich for some of our blood, whatever. But either way, a little bit of a lull in the draft season, certainly a lull in the offseason as a whole. The kind of big free agent movements have really slowed and really trickled. We get the occasional breadcrumb. Odell Beckham Jr. was offered a contract by the Baltimore Ravens, whatever. In the spirit of kind of hyping ourselves up a little bit for the NFL draft, I wanted to take a look back. My dad always used to hate how Des Bryant, it seemed like after he would catch a pass, would take a step backwards and then kind of like rev the engine up. And so I thought about that when putting together this particular game. We are going to look at the last 5 draft classes for the Dallas Cowboys, and we are going to assemble, in fact, you've each already done so, our 10 the 10 best draft picks that the Dallas Cowboys have made. So that's 2018 through last year. I think this will also be a bit of an important retrospective look, Tom, because it will give us an indication at who the Cowboys have found. 5 years. Why? Why 5? Well, it's a clean number. 6 would have been stupid. 4 would have been dumb. You know what I mean? 5 is a nice, even point to look at. I will be writing an article about this, and we'll throw the list up there as well if you want to see this in the aftermath at bloggingtheboys.com. But do you feel like, Tom, this is a good way to kind of calibrate our expectations of what we can, hope to see from Will McClay and everybody in a few weeks' time?
Yeah, it's also, I don't know, it's a little bit of a confidence builder when you look back. There's some pretty solid players in that 5-year stretch.
Okay.
It wasn't hard coming up with 10.
Tony, did you have actually, Tony, you were the first to get your list in. So I imagine you did not have a difficult time.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, it became splitting hairs at the end with some of these guys. I think some at the top were easy for me, but I actually did have to erase and kind of go back and move up and down a little bit. So I put a little more thought into it. Just because I was first doesn't mean I didn't need to have a couple of head scratching picks there.
Brandon, Tom accidentally only sent me 9 players when I asked for a top 10. So to call him out right now, it's just kind of my job. You got all 10, but you were last in, Brandon. Did you feel any pressure knowing that you were last technically?
Nah, not at all. I kind of had a list in my head, but parent life with the kids kind of threw things off. So kind of got that to you about 30 minutes before showtime. But it really was, like Tony said, it was kind of splitting hairs with some of the, I kind of came down to about, I think I had 12, 13 off the top of my head. And getting the last couple in was really where I was at, but I'm very happy with the top 10. And just in the last 5 years, I think it's just been, the Cowboys have done a heck of a job drafting players.
Okay, so let's see here. Watsamata Tom has said that you said your number 10 was Bossman Fat, talking about the Cowboys' second-round pick in 2021, Kelvin Joseph. Kelvin was not on anybody's list. I can tell you all that. Our panelists and I have not seen anybody's list except for their own. I have because I'm a narcissist. And so I have all the information at this point in time. Being said, we're going to go in ascending order to build up drama. So we're going to go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you are watching the show on YouTube, whether live or after the fact, we're going to put the names one by one at the end. We'll put the entire group and we're going to list them in the order that we are from a clockwise standpoint. So the first name you'll see is mine. The second is Tom's. The third is Tony's. The fourth is Brandon's. Would anybody believe that we actually kind of had a tie for this? There are 2 players here, even though there are 4 of us. So 2 of us agreed for each of the, we each had the same person, 2 of us had, you get my point. There are 2 players. It's a very difficult thing to say. So the person who had the same player as me was actually Brandon. Brandon, who was number 10 on your list and why?
It's Deron Bland. I think, seeing what he's done in his rookie year, I know that's why I put him at 10, because he's only had 1 year under his belt, but as a 5th-round pick, he has come in. He's done a heck of a job. He had a lot of interceptions this past year, and the future is very bright for this kid. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if we look back here in 5 years from now. We look back and Deron Bland could be in my top 3 or in our top 3 for the last 5 years. And Deron Bland just great value. It was a great find in the 5th round, and I think he's going to be a part of the Cowboys' future for a good time here.
Yeah, and for me, Brandon, just to kind of like explain why I put Deron here is for me, some of this is value. I mean, it's 5th-round pick. You know what I mean? Like that's an incredible return on investment. I know people really soured on Orlando Scandrick at the very end, but that was an incredible return on investment. I mean, you get a starter for over 5 years in the 5th round or beyond. I mean, that is something that you can certainly hang your hat on. So you and I are simpatico so far, Brandon. But the other 2 players here tonight, Tony Catalina and Tom Ryle, both had Michael Gallup, a 3rd-round pick in 2018. Tom, explain why Michael Gallup is so low on your list.
Just because he he's had the injury problem. He hasn't produced, and he's kind of having to reestablish himself. It was tough. I definitely wanted to make sure I got him on the list. It's just I could see reasons why, looking at it right now, that's where he is. Now, a good season, he would probably move up if we did this same exercise a year from now. But right now, that's kind of where I see him, that we definitely want to include him. It's just, yeah, he's kind of, with the injuries and everything, it's kind of been a little rough the past couple of years.
I'll be honest, Tom. I think that's a little bit harsh. Michael Gallup is 7th on my personal list because he has helped the Cowboys survive some. Like, think about it. Michael Gallup was drafted into a world where the Dallas Cowboys had just released Des Bryant and had Allen Hurns and Deontay Thompson and Tavon Austin. And yes, Amari Cooper showed up, but Michael Gallup has kind of been the one point of stable, ness under the rocky, river that this has been, Tony. But you had Michael Gallup at 10 as well.
Yeah, I think I'll own it. I think it may be a little bit of recency bias in the sense that I think Michael Gallup definitely belonged in the top 10, but for me, I had to find a way to put him at the bottom there. He's made plays when he's healthy, but last year he was a shell of himself, and I'm bullish on Michael Gallup. I think that he is going to step up, and I think he'll be healthier and more productive next year. But I guess this is more of a shout out or a testament to the way this team drafts, that there were 9 guys that I felt comfortable putting in front of him. But that really doesn't take anything away from the way I feel about Michael Gallup.
So Watson Mata chimes in and says Gallup has toyed with excellence, but never grabbed it and made it his own. I would disagree. I would say 2020 Michael Gallup before the Dak injury was something supremely special. That Seattle loss that Dallas had, we really felt like we were starting to see Michael Gallup kind of come into his own. I also think a good measurement, talking about like the return on investment, if you earn a second contract, and I know we all have thoughts on the Gallup deal at this point, but if you are worthy of a second contract, like by nature, you are one of the better draft picks in recent memory, because that is a far less common thing than we actually think it to be. Kevin says that is fair, Tom. I have confidence in him. The team was insane to think a guy with a week 17 ACL tear was going to be okay this year. Talking about this past year, of course, the 2022 season. And that's kind of a symptom of the Cowboys. The Cowboys have not necessarily set their players up to succeed well. They've placed improper expectations on them. I think Jalen Tolbert is another example of that. Tony, Tom, you both had Michael Gallup at 10. I had him at 7, as mentioned. But Brandon, you didn't even have him on your list. So Michael Gallup not even good enough to crack the top 10 for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think for me, it's just more so the injuries. Obviously he got hurt in 2021, so that was an unfortunate situation, which made a 2022 season for Gallup just more of a, he came in, he played, he got himself in the groove, but the stats weren't really there. His career high in receptions, I believe, is, I think it's 60. I think it's like 66, I believe, off the top of my head. He's got 1,000-yard season in his entire career. And I do like the fact that the Cowboys gave him a nice contract, but to me he's kind of been a disappointment with that contract thus far, and it's not really because of his play, it's just because of his availability. And unfortunately for me, I'm one of those people where your biggest ability is your availability. So for me, it comes down to this being injury prone. He's flashed that potential. He's had some great games, but I haven't seen enough for me over the time he's been in Dallas since he's been drafted that I could put him in my top 10. I have 10 guys that I feel have already, even the rookies that just came in. I have other rookies on the list here that I think have surpassed him in that category. That's just, my opinion on it. Michael Gallup could be, maybe in the next couple of years, he could be on my top 10 easily, but right now I just can't put him there right now. It's nothing against him as the player. He hasn't lived up to it, and it's because of injury.
You mentioned the rookies that you have ahead of Michael Gallup. We talked about it. You had DaRon Bland, number 10. Obviously, Michael Gallup's not on the list, so DaRon Bland is ahead of him. Tony Catalina, you had DaRon Bland at number 9. So, not quite number 10, just ahead of him. Now, I will tell you, Tony, because we already kind of talked about DaRon Bland, that 2 of us, between myself, Tom, and Brandon, also had the same player at number 9 on our list. So who do you think had the same player at number 9, and who do you think that player was? It's a name we have not discussed yet.
Let me look. I want to see my notes here. I'm gonna say it's Brandon and Tom, and I'm gonna say Dorrance Armstrong.
That is incorrect. So Big fail.
Naturally.
Tom and I both had Dalton Schultz as the 9th best Dallas Cowboys draft pick over the last 5 years. Tony has mentioned you had Deron Bland. Brandon, you had another rookie. So back-to-back rookies for you at 10 and 9. You have Tyler Smith, obviously last year's first-round pick. We'll get to that in a moment. But Tom, Dalton Schultz, kind of a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth. Who cares? 1-year deal with the Houston Texans. Dalton played poker and the Cowboys outplayed him. He's a loser. We're the winners. Jake Ferguson, Peyton Hendershot, frickin' frack. We don't need him. But Dalton Schultz was a very, very serviceable player for the Cowboys, especially considering the climate he was drafted in that same weekend as Michael Gallup.
Yeah. If you look at what he gave the team in his 5 years, to me, just going down the list of all the players drafted in the 5 years, you talked about return on investment. That's a very solid return on investment. And as you mentioned, that second contract is not that common a thing, and it's that's just kind of how it goes. The Cowboys really like to stay young, and so it's not surprising that he would move on, especially when they've got younger, cheaper options that they hope are going to produce. So that was just where I saw him. I thought he belonged in the top 10, and that's where he landed with me.
He did get a second contract. Like, it doesn't feel like that because it wasn't a long-term contract, but
Yeah.
he got the franchise tag. I mean, that they paid him $11 million for 1 year of service. I mean, so like he did technically sign 2 contracts with the team. And again, I think when the world ends and we tell the story of the Dallas Cowboys and we write a book, like Dalton Schultz deserves an important chapter almost because he was drafted the week that Jason Witten retired. And we had no idea what the future of the position was going to look like. We had no real idea even who Blake Jarwin was. That 3-touchdown game against the New York Giants wouldn't come for several months. I mean, Dalton Schultz was thrusted into absolute chaos. And so he had his rookie season, like, what's going to happen here? This is all crazy. This is all wild. And then guess what, Dalton Schultz, you got your bearings under you here in the NFL. Jason Witten's back, relegated to 3rd on the depth chart. And now guess what, Dalton? We're going to pay Blake Jarwin. He's the guy we really care about. Oh, he tore his ACL. Dalton, we really need you to come in and survive. Oh, Dak Prescott's out. Like, again, Dalton Schultz really survived a lot of perseverance, Tony Catalina, and I don't think that we give him enough credit for that.
Yeah, honestly, you mentioned it in an earlier segment talking about, making a second contract should put you in this list. And that's kind of what I was struggling with Dalton Schultz, because a lot of what you said is 100% on the money. Dalton Schultz is a quality football player. He did a lot of good things here in some unfavorable positions. This is just the nature of the beast. Sometimes you gamble on yourself. When it comes to a contract, you go to a place like Houston. So, I have, it's probably not a popular opinion, but I'm more so I have fond memories of Dalton Schultz. I know he made some plays and he made the most of his opportunity, but for me personally, I'm not going to spoil it, but he wasn't my number 9 pick. I'll just say that.
Well, he wasn't because they're on the screen, so you wouldn't be spoiling it.
Right.
But
or 10.
Yeah. But he's not on your list at all, Tony. So you're over here throwing roses at Dalton Schultz, and you don't even have him on the list. I'll spoil that. I'll call you out. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth.
Well, that's what I was trying to avoid. I don't want to ruin the list and say, Dalton Schultz might be somewhere. But yeah, I couldn't put him on the list. And I think that's more, again, a testament to how well the Cowboys draft.
So interesting that Michael Gallup makes your list, but not Dalton Schultz. Some would say that's interesting at the very least. Now, Brandon, you do not have Dalton Schultz at this particular spot. You have Tyler Smith. You upset some people in the comment section. Now, spoiler, Tony, Tom, and I all have Tyler on our list. Obviously not as low as you do at this particular point. Let's see here. Let me find the first comment. Kevin has deducted 5 points from you, Brandon, saying -5 for Tyler Smith at 9. I know it is 1 year, but he had to start at left tackle when he wasn't supposed to. So then there was some comments about like, whoa, I didn't even see this. And Rick says Tyler would be higher on my list, but agree with Gallup, Bland, Schultz. So general agreement with the list so far, but Tyler Smith all the way down at 9. What's going on, Brandon? You hate Tyler. It was his birthday yesterday, and you are over here hating on him.
Well, happy belated birthday, Tyler. That's and here's the thing: at nine, that's not a bad spot to be in because he's had 1 year under his belt. He is the future at left tackle. We understand that. For me, I look at it as just a value at this point. He's got 1 year under his belt. I'm not one of those guys that, like, especially watching like the NBA, it's like, oh, the sky's the limit. It's like, okay, well, I want to see more on the field first. I like what he's doing. I think I think he led the league in penalties this past year, and so he still has work to do, but he has all the tools. Like I think he's going to be a pretty darn good player, and I think he's a future All-Pro. But for me, he's on my list for a reason. he's pretty darn good. And a lot of people did not like that draft pick last year. So everybody that's, commenting at me with the 9, last year you didn't even know who he was. A lot of you, like, that's, like, people were mad that he was drafted in the first round last year. I was indifferent. I wasn't on the Tyler Smith train when he was drafted, but I'm one of those where I'm like, I trust the Cowboys process. And that's just how I feel about Tyler Smith. But I think for me, it's just, that's why I put DaRon Bland at 10, Tyler Smith at 9. I think Tyler Smith is slightly, I think at this point, they've done really well this past year. And I do think both players are going to, they're going to move up this list as the years go on. I just think, given positional value, left tackle over cornerback, that's the only reason why I had it 9 and 10 versus 10 and 9 for Smith and Bland. It's just positional value. And I think Tyler Smith is just, it's just not, he hasn't been in the game long enough to get my, even a top 5 at this point.
So you're saying that it was actually close, a bit of a coin flip proposition for Tyler Smith and DaRon Bland for you. Interesting.
Yeah.
Kevin kind of combats you. Brandon says -5 again. Not knowing who he was is not a great argument. And I would argue that the fact that we all hated the pick and the fact that we all love him so much now is a testament to how incredible of a pick it was. But I understand it is super early in the process. It's difficult. We also don't even know exactly where he's going to play this year. But I will tell you, because you mentioned top 5, he is safely in all of our top 5s. Not a spoiler alert, Tony. Don't worry. But wow. Okay, let's move on. So we have gone through 10 and 9. So that leaves us to number 8. I had the same player as somebody again. So I have had copycat answers all so far. It was not you, Tom, that I had the same answer for at number 8. Who do you think I shared an answer with here?
Brandon.
It was Brandon. Brandon and I both had Tyler Biadasz as the 8th best Dallas Cowboys draft pick over the last 5 years. An important note that the Cowboys traded up to draft Tyler Biadasz with the Philadelphia Eagles of all teams. The Cowboys' last 2 trades executed with the Philadelphia Eagles are Micah Parsons and Tyler Biadasz, and the third one, Sean Lee. So good times right there. That being said, we do have our first Dorrance Armstrong appearance from you, Tony Catalina, and our first Leighton Vander Esch appearance by you, Tom. I will say Dorrance is not on my list or Tom's list. So Dorrance not getting a whole lot of love here. So let's kind of start there. Tony Catalina, why do you believe Dorrance Armstrong, another 4th round pick, kind of barely got the second contract, was kind of a benefit of Randy Gregory and that whole situation falling apart? That's kind of my argument against you, but make the case for Dorrance Armstrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be more production on the defensive side of the ball, but he's coming around. He's making plays defensively. I know that he has some fans, within this organization. He has fans within the fan base and myself. I think he can, what his ceiling is, it hasn't been touched yet, but that doesn't even include the fact that he's been a demon on special teams and he's made some really big critical plays. I think his surface is really just being scratched on what he can do. For me, it's the opportunities hasn't been as robust as some of these other guys on this list that I had here, but it's just what he's done with his ability, what he's done with his actions, and even for his sack totals, they're not crazy impressive numbers, but they're like almost sneaky good. So and that's kind of how he fits in my list here. Like he sneakily slipped into the 8th spot for me, and I feel comfortable with him in there.
Tom, you don't have Dorrance Armstrong on your list either. So do you think Tony's stupid?
No. No, I mean he wasn't far off of it. I just had reasons for picking the other people. It's I look more at it like I saw.
He wasn't even your honorable mention, Tom. You did include an honorable mention, which I didn't put on the list, and it was not Dorrance Armstrong. So not even in your top 11.
Yeah, but I just these other players. Dorrance has been solid. But I think the other players on my list have had more impact at their positions. And it's not that I don't like Dorrance. I mean, we're talking the Cowboys have 22 starters out there, plus a couple guys that rotate, when you talk about the 3rd cornerback and the 3rd wide receiver and, all that stuff. So it's, there's just a lot of people to consider. And he just didn't quite make the cut with me. What can I say?
Brandon, you do have Dorrance on your list. I'm not going to say where quite yet. But my argument against this is the players that we've talked about generally so far, DaRon Bland, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz are kind of the big 3. You can make an argument that at some point in their Cowboys career, they were the most impactful player at their position. Deron Bland is maybe the most you have to stretch that verbiage, right? Like, the interceptions and things like that. But there was a moment in time where he was the most impactful corner on the team. Not the best, but the most impactful. Dalton Schultz, one of the most impactful tight end, and Michael Gallup certainly in the mishmash of everything in the 2019 season and 20 season and 21 season, whatever. But that being said, Dorrance Armstrong, has he ever been the most impactful pass rusher on the Cowboys, like at any point ever in his career?
I wouldn't say he's been the most impactful, but he's been one of the most impactful. I mean, when you're on a team with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons attacking the quarterback, it's kind of hard to be the face because those two guys obviously are the two thoroughbreds on that pass rushing unit. But he's had some great moments over the years. I mean, he's had some special in this past season alone. He was a special teams demon, and he's played so well throughout 2022. He had 8.5 sacks last year. So for me, he's on an upper trajectory. He's one of those guys where that's why they draft him in the 4th round, way back when, because they saw the traits. He just needed a little bit of seasoning and coaching, and now you're starting to see it. And I'm glad the Cowboys got him back on another contract, even though if it was for the Randy Gregory situation, it's good to see Dorrance here because I think he's scratching the surface of a guy who I think can be a double-digit sack guy, in the next couple of years. He has enough talent. I think it took him a little bit of time to figure it out, maybe from a technique perspective, but he's on an upper trajectory. That's why he's on my list a little bit higher than where we're at right now.
I can't believe that you, Brandon, have Dorrance on your list, but not Michael Gallup, or that, Tony, you have Dorrance higher than Michael Gallup. Tony, you said that the recency bias may have played a factor with Michael Gallup. I think that's playing a factor both ways here. I think we're maybe overrating Dorrance a little bit and maybe underrating Michael Gallup a little bit.
Sure. I mean, also in the fact that, he's had 13.5 sacks in the last 2 years. I mean, if it wasn't for Micah Parsons on this team, which is obviously asking a lot, he would have led the team in sacks this year. So, and I think he did that in such a quiet manner that if we didn't know this team and know the stat and cover this team like we do, like that's a sneaky 8.5 sacks. And there's been years on this team's past where 8.5 would have been like by far the best sack total this team has seen. And, like I said, there may be a little bit of recency biases when you put this together. You look at the full picture, but I'm confident with where I have him.
I do think that he's a fine player. Like, I don't mean to be like this hater of Dorrance Armstrong, but again, he did get the second contract. We established that was kind of a prerequisite here. It wasn't necessarily something that the Cowboys planned. So there's a little bit of a grain of salt there. But that being said, I do think Dorrance is an example of how great we talk so much about like the 2016 Dallas Cowboys draft class, right? And everybody loves to talk about the 1975 class, whatever. The 2018 class really gave the Cowboys some high-level contributors. Connor Williams in the second round, Michael Gallup, Dorrance Armstrong, Dalton Schultz, Cedric Wilson. But the first round pick in 2018, Tom, was the player that you have right here, and it was Leighton Vander Esch. We all hated the pick. We all wanted Derwin James. We said, how could they do this? He's going to be injury prone, et cetera, et cetera. That first season was magnificent. And then the labels reared their ugly head before Leighton turned into one of the most important defenders on the team. Fortunately, they were able to bring him back this offseason.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Do you need me to add anything to that?
Well, why is he here? Why is he this high? Why is he this low? I mean, what's your context?
Because last year we found out how important he is for what he does mentally on the field. He's the guy that wears the green dot on defense. He's the one that gets the calls in. He gets everybody into position. And when he missed a few games, the defense was discombobulated. And that just to me says, yeah, he's very important. It extends beyond just his stat line. It's how he kind of elevates the rest of the defense around him. And it was a comeback year. A year ago, he would not have made my list at the same time. And so that's where I see it, that this is maybe that recency bias, but he had that great first year. Now he's had a great fifth year. And so I'm looking to him having hopefully a few more really good years.
Rick says that LVE is in their top 5, Tom. He's obviously not in yours. Tony, do you think Leighton is in anybody's top 5? I guess it would be yours, mine, or Brandon's.
I'm going to say yes, but probably number 5.
He is in somebody's top 5. That could have been Tony playing poker, because Tony could be, like, I don't know, but he might be in Tony's top 5. We will see. All right, Brandon, last thing on Leighton. I mean, we'll talk about Leighton in a little bit, but I do think a year ago, we all kind of thought Leighton was this beneficiary of Micah Parsons and his wonderful rookie season. But I do think, to all of our points, obviously, that Leighton really kind of carved out his own place and his own piece of worth within this Cowboys defense. And we saw that as the season obviously got to the end of the regular season.
Yeah, he definitely did. He looked. I mean, this fifth season that he had, which would have been his fifth-year option, which unfortunately, obviously, things didn't pan out that way, but it worked out for the Cowboys financially. I mean, he had a good rookie year, as Tom said, and then he had a good fifth year, and then what was in between, not that great. So that's, to me, I'm just glad he came back. He kind of fell to the Cowboys on a decent contract, very very friendly contract, and had a good fifth season. So to me, that's why my list is a little bit different than everybody else's. I'm guessing with Leighton Vander Esch.
Okay, so I mentioned that I had Michael Gallup at number 7, so obviously that's who I have. We do have 2 people who have the same answer here. Tom, who do you think they are? It's not me. So between you, Brandon, and Tony, who do you think has the same answer at number 7?
That would be Tony and I.
That is correct. You and Tony both have Tyler Biadasz as your 7th best Dallas Cowboys draft pick over the last 5 years. Brandon and I both had Tyler at number 8, so that means Tyler Biadasz is the first player to make it all the way through, appear on all 4 of our lists, and to get through it at this point in the show. We already mentioned how he wound up with the Cowboys, but why is he on the list, Tom? I mean, we look at all these other sexy positions and whatever. He's just a center, and he came in, he's just going to replace Travis Frederick. He's from Wisconsin. Like, it was all so chalk and predictable, but nevertheless, he has managed to become an important cog in the offensive line.
Oh, well, they call it the pivot sometimes. And it's the fact that he came in and he's never really had a struggle. He came in, was competent his first season. He seems to have improved every season since. It was, good bang for the buck, cost-effective pick. And I just have a love for the offensive linemen. I think, they are what makes the offense really go. If you have a bad offensive line, it really hampers what your quarterback and your skill positions can do. And I just think he has really, even exceeded a lot of expectations. I think probably most expectations. A lot of people did not think that they were going to get much out of him. There was a lot of trepidation with going with him as the starter to replace Travis Frederick. Fred Beard was I think before his disease hit him, he was, I think, arguably the best center in the league. And for Biadasz to come in and it not really degrade the line with having him there, that was why I just saw him as he deserved to be in the top 10, and that was why I have him that high.
Tony, it did feel kind of like stupid almost. Like, it felt kind of silly. Like, you really think you can go right back to Wisconsin? Like the offseason that Travis Frederick retires, like it felt silly. Like it felt like it was almost embarrassing that the Cowboys did. And that, again, I mentioned it, that they traded up for it. It was like, guys, be way less thirsty than you appear to be, trying to just like replicate Travis Frederick. But they kind of did. I mean, he hasn't been that great, but he has been serviceable. And if you're a serviceable center in the NFL, that's pretty good. He was a Pro Bowler this past season as an alternate, so take that how you will. But still, I think we're all pretty satisfied. A solid return on investment.
Yeah, I mean, asking or thinking you're going to have a Travis Frederick is a fool's errand there. But they've done as close as they can, right? So Travis, you got Tyler Biadasz comes in here, and he's just solid. I think that's the best way to describe it. I mean, he's not wowing anybody, but he's doing his job. He's keeping his job. And going into this offseason, there were a lot of people within the fan base that I communicated with and talked to that were ready to move on or didn't think that he was the guy. And he's kind of just been steady Eddie. And that's what I respect about him so much, is the fact that whether it be Alec Lindstrom, a friend of the show, or whoever is coming in, he's just controlled his position. He's taken his job, and nobody's really challenged him for it. But beyond that, and why he's in my top 10 is because that cog in the middle is so important. You see what it's like if he's not out there when he dealt with the ankle injury, and you kind of just look at what that calmness in the middle. Obviously, the Dak Prescott and him, they have a good rapport, and for me, he's squarely in my top 10. And he didn't quite crack the top 5, but I have a lot of respect for Tyler Biadasz.
Brandon, we already covered where Tyler was on your list. I think I speak for all of us, and I presume you in saying that it would be really nice to see the Cowboys get a contract extension done with him. This is the final year of his rookie contract, a 4th-round pick in 2020.
Absolutely. I think that's one of those deals that needs to get done as soon as possible. I think to everybody's point, I think he's he's not the flashiest guy. I mean, not a lot of offensive linemen are going to be known as flashy guys, but he's in there and he's steady. He's just a good hand. He's just a guy that goes in, does his job, brings his lunch pail to work and just goes to town and he plays good football. And if the Cowboys don't want to do another contract, I mean, there is another Wisconsin center in this year's class, Joe Tittman, that could be just in that right range once again, where the Cowboys could pound that drum for another center from Wisconsin. I mean, it's worked twice. I mean, third time. I mean, why not?
Okay. Well, if we really want to be that predictable and that chalk, Brandon, that is certainly something that I'll make fun of. Brandon, you're taking a little bit of heat tonight with your list. Kevin has come for you. You had Dorrance Armstrong at number 7. Tony had him at number 8. He was not on Tom nor I's list, but Kevin says 7 is too high for Armstrong. Last year was his one good year, and most of his production was the first half of the season. I think this is a fair point, and I think Tom agrees, which is why he doesn't have him on his list. But I guess defend yours and Tony's stance a little bit here, Brandon.
Yeah, for me, it all comes down to the tape. I watched the tape. I know the stats. The stats are, he's got 8.5 sacks last year. He had 5 sacks the year before. He's one of those guys. He's been a development player, and you can see where he is as a player. And with 8.5 sacks on the same team as a Micah Parsons, and DeMarcus Lawrence, even Fowler, he had a good season as well. Like, just to get in the mix with all that depth and all that talent and still get 8.5 sacks, pretty good. And last time I checked, he was a 4th-round pick. So that value to me, that's how I equate it. I equate to he's paid his dues, he's worked his tail off, he's built himself up into a pretty darn good football player. And last year, we really got to see a lot of Dorrance Armstrong with that 8.5 sacks. So, the tail of the tape shows that he's a hard worker. He's getting so much better. And on a 4th-round return, he gets a second contract. That's why I put him at 7. I just see so much from Dorrance Armstrong. I think again, he's gonna be a double-digit sack guy in my opinion in the next year or two. It just wouldn't surprise me one bit.
All right, let's get to who we each have at number 6. Now, Tom, there is somebody here of us 4 that has somebody at number 6 that doesn't appear on anybody else's list at all. So who do you think that player is, and who do you think chose him? Did you understand the context here? Because I know I worded it very confusingly.
Gosh, yeah, you're saying that somebody has a player that nobody else has on their list at all, and
correct.
They have them at 6.
Right. So who's the player and who picked him? It could be yourself if you play the game right.
I'm betting that my pick is going to show up on at least one other list for 6. I'm going to guess Brandon just because he seems to be bucking the ways here. I don't know. Connor McGovern?
You are half right. Which half do you think it is?
Who it was?
It was Brandon. And Tony, who do you think the player is? It's not Connor McGovern.
Oh my God. Connor Williams?
No, for what it's worth, Connor was my 11th player. I really struggled. I mean, he was such an important part in 2019. He was the only offensive lineman who stayed healthy. I just did want to give him a little bit of a shout out. It was not, but it was somebody from Connor Williams' draft class. We talked about that, and it was Cedric Wilson. So Brandon coming in hot.
Hold on. It was Donovan Wilson.
Okay, well, you sent Cedric in the chat. So
I sent Wilson. That's my bad.
Okay, then never mind all the fun that we just had.
Hold on. To be fair, Tom is right. I have bucked the trend a little bit, so I could see why you were going that way on that one.
I will say, Brandon, that your number 5 is gonna catch some attention. That's a bit of a spoiler alert. So, okay, so Donovan Wilson, we've corrected it. When we throw the graphic on at the end, it will say Donovan. It will say Cedric, but it will be fixed for the article. So that being said, I think Donovan Wilson is very smart. I do think there's a little bit of recency bias there as well. Tom, you and I both had Tony Pollard. So you said you thought he would show up. This is his first appearance here. You and I have him all the way down at 6. Why is he not higher on your list?
he's just been a role playing back. Now he's going to have to step up and take the lead back job. And I think he's going to do well. It's going to be interesting to see how the Cowboys approach the position, both in offensive scheme and who else they might try to get in the draft. And the people over there arguing about having the Cowboys draft a tight end in the first, wanting us to talk about that, which we're going to ignore. Running back is another place that could lead to some interesting decisions. But to me, actually, one of the things that made sure he was in my top 10 was that I thought he finally gave the team the courage to make the move they had to make with Ezekiel Elliott, that they knew they would have a starter in place. But that's just, once again, it was more a case of the 5 people ahead of him I had a little bit better opinion of.
Well, for what it's worth, Brandon and Tony both have Pollard on their list, a little bit higher than you and I do. I agree. We're going to talk about Donovan Wilson in a moment. Danny has a comment in the chat saying 1 good year. You can make an argument that Pollard, he's only really come on the last 2 years, and that's not Pollard's fault. But as far as return on investment, maybe not the best looking draft pick in the overall. And a lot of that is self-induced, but it is what it is. Tony, you had Leighton Vander Esch. We discussed him obviously at length already. So Brandon, bit of a confusing landing of the plane there. Not Cedric Wilson. We can all give Cedric a shout out. I was going to say Jess Haney wrote at bloggingtheboys.com how the Cowboys could maybe consider trading for Cedric, who's apparently on the trade block in Miami. Who knows? We all love Cedric, but not on any of our lists apparently. Donovan Wilson. I mentioned it. Danny Phantom said recency bias, and all caps, Dono doesn't belong on the list. Defend your point, Brandon.
All right. So for me, Donovan Wilson, he had a heck of a season last year, if I'm not mistaken. He was one of the leaders in tackles on the team in 2022. He did have a little bit of an injury issue in 2021, which is why his stats were a little down. 2020 was a decent season for him as well. For me, it's just he's one of those guys. He's such a flashy player, and it doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. So for me, I watch the games with my eyeballs, and then the stats sometimes will tell me if I'm right or wrong. In this case, my eyeballs just tell me that he's just a heck of a football player. He's one of those guys that I was very happy that he came back for another contract, another go around, because he's such an impactful player. Whether he makes the tackle or makes the play, he's always around the ball. He's just a lot of fun. He's an energy guy, and overall, he's just fun to watch. And the stats do back it up, especially this past year with 101 tackles. He's one of those guys that I think if he wasn't on the team in 2023, people would be like, oh man, I really wish Donovan Wilson was back. Thankfully he is. He's going to be here. It's going to be a great run, and I'm looking forward to another good season of Donovan Wilson.
Brandon, Kevin coming for you tonight says Brandon needs to see more from Tyler Smith, but Donovan Wilson, yeah, let's make him 6 after 1 good year. So, this is a feisty chat tonight. That's all I'll say. You know what I'm saying? I imagine the comments on the article are going to be wonderful for everybody involved, obviously. Tony, Donovan Wilson is not on your list at all, and he is only on one list between me and Tom. So whose list do you think he's on?
I'm going to say yours.
He is not. He is on Tom's list, though, as a bit of a spoiler. My argument against Donovan Wilson is sort of my argument against Dorrance Armstrong. Is he the most impactful safety on the team? Like, you can make an argument that like he's the most impactful, like in a literal like impacting sense, but like if right now, if I told each of you, you can only you have to banish one forever from the Cowboys, Jaron Kearse or Donovan Wilson. Is anybody picking Donovan Wilson to keep? I mean, that's my point. Like, again,
I don't think Kearse is going to be around as long.
No, but I'm saying right now, today, you have to pick one. Like you can only have one player on the team for 2023.
Yeah, I'd probably have to lean to Kearse, but then
and again, like I'm not like Donovan Wilson's an Aggie, like you and I, Tom. So like I don't want to be a jerk here, but I'm just this is hard. It's a top 10. It's not a top 10 plus 3. You know what I mean? Like I got to limit it to 10 people. So that's just kind of what it was. Okay, so we're through number 6. There is a player making an appearance for the first time at number 5 that is on all of our lists. Brandon, who do you think it is? So everybody has this player obviously in the top 5 because we're down to number 5. But only one person has them at number 5, if that makes sense. So who do you think that player is?
I think
it's Trayvon Diggs. Look at Brandon. Tom has Trayvon Diggs. I told everybody Brandon has Dalton Schultz at number 5, so I cannot wait to hear that explanation. I have Tyler Smith. We've talked about how impactful he is. He is a top 5 pick for me at this point in time. He's a first-round pick, so I respect that the Cowboys went out on a limb and they cashed out. You know, the Cowboys hit on 20, and we were all like, that's so stupid, and out came the ace. And so I give them a lot of credit for that. Tony, you had Tyler Smith here as well, so congratulations to us. Tom, Trayvon Diggs, second-round pick in 2020. We all said we would have been satisfied had the Cowboys taken him with their first-round pick that year. They were fortunate enough to let him see all the way through the end of the first and into the second round where they landed him. So go ahead, Trayvon Diggs.
Yeah, well, he had the season the season he led the league in interceptions. He's a key part of the secondary. Is he the quarterback one right now? I'm not sure, but for a second round pick, that's an awfully good amount of talent to land. And I mean, what can you say that would disqualify him from being in the top 5?
I don't think anything. I think the argument here would be, why do you have him so low? Like, I think that would be the argument against you. So what are his flaws then, since you have him this far down?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to say that.
To my point, sorry, Tom. Watson Mata says, "Oh my gosh, Diggs not in the top 3." Lord,
it's just that I can't really say without tipping my arguments for the next 4 players on my list.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Okay. So Tony, Tyler Smith is your number 5 along with me. Speak for us. Why? And you did get, apparently Watsamata only thinks that you have Tyler Smith here, even though I have him as well. But Watsamata gave you 5 points for having Tyler in his rightful spot.
You don't get points, RJ.
Kevin gave us both points, by the way. So go ahead.
Fair enough. For me, it's I'll say it, and it's not something that isn't known. If you watch the Roundtables, any of our Blog and the Boys coverage, I wasn't very satisfied or happy with the Tyler Smith pick, but I got to give respect where it's due. I think Tyler Smith has exceeded a lot of people's expectations. For me, the Cowboys stand on their principles. They believed in their pick. They went and they made a selection that was not widely viewed as a very popular pick, and it looks like they hit a home run with it. I mean, they're going to have the left tackle of the future, somebody that, if we could run the tape back, if we can find that, just our reactions during the draft coverage of it was not the most jovial bunch of people, but I'll eat crow and I'll eat it proudly because Tyler Smith, without a doubt in my mind, was a top 5 draft pick for the Cowboys in the last 5 years.
And, that was something like Leighton Vander Esch, like Tristan Hill. They really started to kind of leak out about 24 hours, maybe 30 hours before the draft that they were leaning in that direction. So we all kind of had a big panic session for a day and a half thinking they're not going to do this. They're not going to do this. And then what made it worse, Tony, was the doubling down that Jerry did. We all kind of forget the night after, or the night of, with the list and kind of like they were pumping their chest. We were like, you fools, you know what I mean? But so I give them a lot of props for hanging some onion, and they, they walked up to the plate. You said hit a home run, and they pointed the bat, and we were like, oh, it was the 9th batter in the lineup. We were like, there's no way, but it was the highest exit velocity that anybody could have possibly had. It was amazing. Watsamata has given us $10 as a super chat. Thank you. Watsamata says, this is a great roundtable. Use the $10 on beer. I don't know how we could afford 4 for $10 unless we are in some sort of college town where Donovan Wilson spent his time in College Station, obviously. We'll see. Brandon, look, I talked about hanging onion. You have Dalton Schultz at 5. So just to recap, the 5 players below Dalton Schultz on Brandon's list. I'm going 6 through 10. Donovan Wilson, Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Biadasz, Tyler Smith, Deron Bland. I think Dalton Schultz is worthy of being on the list, but why is he worthy of being this high?
To me, it's all about return on investment. That's where I come in. He's a 4th round pick. He had to step into the enormous shoes of the GOAT of tight ends, Jason Witten. And he's done a hell of a job. The last 3 years, he's had good numbers. He's not going to put up Travis Kelce numbers. I'm not expecting him to do that. But he's done what he's supposed to do. He's just a great down the field, right down the middle threat. He was to me the last couple of years. He reminded me, and I'm not saying he is Jason Witten. I don't want to put that in the universe, but he reminded me of a guy like Jason Witten who could he quietly just catch passes for 8 to 10 yards. He put up, in 2021, he had 8 touchdowns. To me, and here's the other thing: people don't, understand or respect the blocker that he is. He's actually a better blocker than people think he is. The stats will back it up. Anybody can look that up. I mean, if you look at PFF, you can see the stats on that. So, I mean, he's a better blocker than people think he is. And to me, he's going to be missed. I think he's going to be missed. I think, unfortunately, he was going to be priced out of our range. I felt like for what the Cowboys were willing to pay him, but he's done well enough to stick around in this league for a while. And he is, in my book right now, he's a top 10 tight end in the NFL. And for me, what he's done to fill the shoes of Jason Witten, and as a 4th-round pick, he learned a lot from Jason Witten, and he's just had one heck of a career for the Cowboys. And it's not going to be Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, but he's steady Eddie, to steal that phrase from Tony. He's steady Eddie, and he's just, to me, he's just been so consistent. And people are gonna miss him this coming year. I really believe that.
I think that there is a recency bias, like hatred or disdain for Dalton Schultz. That's going to cause a lot of people to disagree with you, Brandon, but I agree. I mean, he was a wonderful pick for the Dallas Cowboys. Again, we already encapsulated all the chaos that he was involved in. And the end was kind of, I wouldn't say dramatic, but it just left a sour taste in people's mouths. People are going to be like, what's going on with you? But I mean, I don't think it's as crazy as it sounds. Your list is very unique. I will say that. Okay. So number 4, let's get to it here. Somebody else does not have Trayvon Diggs in their top 3. Obviously, Tom does not. The next person to have Trayvon Diggs on their list is Brandon. So shocking the world by going against the grain here. The 4th best pick of the last 5 years for the Dallas Cowboys in each of our opinions. For me, it's Leighton Vander Esch, who we've touched on. I'm very high on Leighton, obviously. Tom, you have Tyler Smith, so he makes another appearance. You, Tony, and I have him in the top 5. Tony, you have Tony Pollard here. Brandon, you have Trayvon Diggs here. So Trayvon Diggs not in your top 3. Why not, Brandon?
To me, he's I've said this on previous roundtables. I love the way he plays the game. He's very aggressive. He gets beat more times than I'd like. I don't want him to pedal back on the aggressiveness, because I think that's what makes him a great player. But at the same time, I just wish there was some sort of happy common ground for me. It's a little nitpicky for me. I think he gets beat on the double moves. I love his instincts. Majority of the time he's got really great instincts, but I've seen him get beat on double moves way more than than he should. And that's just kind of a pet peeve of mine, is watching growing up watching guys like Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders might not have been a great tackler, but he was he was rarely ever going to get burned on a double move. And for somebody who was a receiver in college at Alabama, which Nick Saban turned him into a cornerback, we've all heard that story before. I don't think his hands have been as good. I feel like he's missed a few interceptions that I feel like, and I mean, again, this is nitpicky, but I feel like if you've had great hands, which I still think he does, I think he's missed some passes that I think his abilities, I think he can pick them off 9 times out of 10. So I feel like maybe it's a mental thing on that, but it's just me. He's a hell of a player. I want him here for a long time. Some of the things he does as a cornerback just kind of scratches my head sometimes. So it's like, I want to find this middle ground with Trayvon. I don't want him to lose the aggressiveness, but I also want him to stop giving up some of those double moves where big plays happen. So he's kind of like a home run or a strikeout kind of guy. I mean, I know RJ's favorite player is Aaron Judge. I'm just kidding on that, but Aaron Judge, he's a strikeout or he's a home run kind of guy. So that's kind of where I put Trayvon Diggs, and that's why I put him at 4. I think he's a hell of a talent. He's going to be here for hopefully for a long time. It's just minor nitpickiness for me with Trayvon.
You mentioned the interceptions that we feel like he could have had. He talked about that before the season in question that Tom talked about, obviously 2021, where he had 1 million interceptions, et cetera, et cetera. Tom, you picked up, where is it here? More points from Watsamata for having Tyler Smith at 4. I think 2 of the top 3, like if anybody does this exercise, are very obvious. We all have 2 of the same top 3. And obviously we're on our way there. The third person in the top 3 is a little bit debatable. It isn't in my mind, but that being said, so you could argue like the draft or whatever starts at 4. And so Tyler Smith is that high for you, Tom. You are that much of a believer already in his second season.
Yeah, you have to be impressed because he was a tackle in college. The Cowboys drafted him to make a guard out of him, at least for his first couple of seasons. And then right in the middle of training camp, he had to switch back out to tackle, go out, be a day one starter. And what more can you ask from a guy? I think he's probably the future at left tackle. At some point, he'll take that over permanently. We aren't sure what he's going to play this fall, but he's going to be a starter somewhere on that line. And to me, when you can lock down such an important position, that makes it a top pick to me.
Tony, Tom and I both had a different Tony Pollard at number 6, but you have him all the way at number 4. Defend yourself.
For me, the lack of usage in Tony Pollard's early career is not something I'm going to ding him for. I think that this pick on its own, where they got him in the 4th round, the talent, the player he is a kudos to their scouting department and able to find this guy. It may say something about running backs and where you can find them and how you can find them. That's another topic for another conversation, but Tony Pollard, the talent, to me, is a top 5 easy pick. The Cowboys are finally starting to use him. They're starting to use him the right way. And in this year, it's going to be his show, and we're going to see what it looks like. So the fact that they didn't use him correctly, and we were clamoring for his talent to be, and we just saw it in the 49ers game. When he went out in the playoff game, looked like a totally different offense, right? So for me to look at this guy and the way he was not used and the way he is going to be used, it's a home run pick regardless of usage.
Rick has given you, Tony, 5 points for having Pollard in your top 5. I'll ask you this. If you had to bet the house, so to speak, is Tony Pollard a Dallas Cowboy in 2024? Simply yes or no. Tom?
No.
Tony?
No.
Brandon?
No.
Okay, I agree with you. So, we all agree no. So how can he be this high on the list is my point.
Because the pick is still the pick. Regardless, and they're going to do a running back room reset. It was hard for them to get rid of Ezekiel Elliott.
But that's the position he plays. You know what I mean? That's part of this.
Sure, but this team is an entirely different football team without him out there. And so for that fact, that matter, they've seen that, they've shown it. We've seen him play well. We've seen him not play well when he isn't there. For me, it's a slam dunk top 5 guy.
What do you say to Kevin, who says 4 is too high for Pollard? Since Dallas started using him, he has shown he can't play a season. He says -5, Tony. If you think a guy is 4, you don't let him go the next season. Oh,
I think it's just too linear of a thought, right? Wow. Tony Pollard in the last 5 years is a top 5 draft pick in my mind in this franchise. But at the same time, you can look and flesh out what's best for this team moving forward. But you can't be mad at the fact that they took this guy in the 4th round. So what? Now we're going to say that we can only take running backs in the 5th round or later? It just, it doesn't make sense.
Joseph Randall was a 5th round pick, just so we're all clear.
True.
Okay, that was contentious. So Tom, Tony, and I have all gotten through Tony Pollard on this list. We have not gotten to him yet on your list, Brandon, your list that has been so magical and so wonderful. We have reached the top 3. So that being said, there are 2 of us who have Trayvon Diggs in the top 3. It is Tony and I. We both have him at number 3. So again, these are the top 10 Dallas Cowboys draft picks over the last 5 years. So beginning in 2018, I have Trayvon Diggs as the 3rd best. Tom, you have Donovan Wilson all the way at number 3. Tony, you have Trayvon Diggs, and Brandon, you have CeeDee Lamb. Tony, who should we hear from first, Brandon or Tom?
I got to hear Tom's reasoning here.
Okay. You did get the 2nd contract. That was a stipulation that we assigned. So you did check that box, Tom.
That is true. That was one of the reasons that I have him here. But the big reason is if you look at the names around him, there's a lot of 1st-round picks. Donovan Wilson was a 6th rounder. And yet he's come in, he's become the starter. He is the enforcer for the defense. And I looked at that and I said, there's nobody else in the 5 years that has given them the bang for the buck that he has. So I graded this on how the Cowboys found a real steal late in the draft, and it's paying off big time. There may be a couple of other players who have a bigger impact in a game, but when you look at what he gives them and how little he costs them, I felt that he deserved to be in my 3rd position.
So Brandon had Donovan, not Cedric Wilson, at number 6. Tony and I did not have Donovan Wilson at all. So this was a big pendulum swing here. Brandon, you've been very colorful tonight. So what do you have to say about Tom's ranking of Donovan Wilson all the way here? Again, so the players that Tom ranked beneath Donovan Wilson: Tyler Smith, Trayvon Diggs, Tony Pollard, Tyler Biadasz, Leighton Vander Esch, Dalton Schultz, Michael Gallup. Brandon, your thoughts?
I don't mind it at all. And yes, I had Donovan Wilson. I had Donovan Wilson at 6. And here's the thing, Tom, and Tom made a great point for me. To me, like I know my rankings are a little out of the maybe a little different than everybody else's. But to me, like how I looked at this when I looked at the question that you posed to us, RJ, I looked at it from impact on the field versus value and what we've done. So that what he's done. That's why I don't mind Tom's point on that. Like, you get a guy who's an enforcer. He's one of the better players on the defense. He got a second contract, and he's a 6th-round pick. I mean, I can't argue with Tom. I couldn't put him any higher because I felt the other 5, based on draft and what they've done, I felt like they were, in my opinion, I felt like they should be a little bit higher on my list. But Tom, I'm happy to see that somebody else went a little jump on the deep end a little bit for that one. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was when I read the question originally from RJ, it was like, what was the best overall moves that Cowboy made?
Let me read the question so everyone understands. Just let's be verbatim here. I said tonight we are going to be picking the 10 best Dallas Cowboys draft picks over the last 5 years. If you can, I would like each of you to give me your list privately in a DM so I can know ahead of time. And Tom, you actually responded with some sass. You said you show us yours. I mean, it was a little bit open interpretation. So you could, call it return on, on investment, whatever, blah, blah, blah. For what it's worth, Tom, Danny Phantom, not a part of the roundtable, but he has been watching. He said, I would like to award Tom 20 points so I could deduct 25 points for that pick. Tony, your thoughts on I guess Tom's ranking of Donovan Wilson and Brandon sort of agreeing with him?
It's unique. It's unique. I have all the respect and more for Donovan Wilson. I'm super happy he's here, but you stood on your opinion. You stood with conviction. So I respect it, Tom.
Is saying it's unique on the East Coast the same as saying bless your heart here in
the same vein? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Sorry.
Great job.
Brandon, you have CeeDee Lamb at number 3. Now, we have not named him, and we all know who number 1 is going to be on this list. It's not going to be very difficult here. But so there's a non-Micah player who you believe was a better draft pick for the Cowboys over the last 5 years than CeeDee Lamb. So should we just go ahead and get to it? I guess is probably we should stop bearing the lead. 3 of us have CeeDee Lamb at number 2. Brandon does not. He has Tony Pollard as a better draft pick than CeeDee. Tony's reaction is amazing. So again, I took CeeDee Lamb. Tom took CeeDee Lamb. Tony took CeeDee Lamb. We'll talk about CeeDee in a moment, who, Brandon, you had at number 3, but you have Tony Pollard as the second best Dallas Cowboys draft pick over the last 5 years.
Yes, and there's one reason for it. The top reason for me is franchise tag. Cowboys look at him as a franchise player, and the numbers don't lie. Ezekiel Elliott, he's been on a downtrend, and the Cowboys coaching staff just wanted to keep force feeding, 4 yards a carry, when we clearly know Tony Pollard is the more explosive player. You get the ball in his hands, magic happens. To me, the stats are going to start going up. He got his first 1,000-yard season, this past year. He had 9 touchdowns on the ground. He had a heck of a season. And yes, sure, the injury questions are this and that. But guess what? He's played, and I think I saw one of the comments earlier. Durability issues. He's played in 15 games at a minimum this entire career. And last time I checked, there were 16 games in the season up until recently, and obviously now we're at a 17-game slate. So I don't buy into that very much. I think for this, it was an unfortunate situation. It was a freak injury in my book, just the way the whole injury happened, and obviously NFL thought so as well, because look what's going on there. So Tony Pollard, to me, Tony made this point about Tony, where he, it was essentially because he didn't get the usage that he probably should have because the coaching staff was stuck on Zeke. And that has nothing to do with the lack of ability for Tony Pollard. I just think I think the staff just thought more of Zeke Elliott than the rest of us with eyeballs that could see how explosive he is. And the biggest thing for me is he's the franchise tag for a reason. You don't put the franchise tag on unless he's a franchise type player. And the reason why he's not and we all talked about it just a few minutes ago. We all agreed unanimously that he's not going to be on the team next year. We'll see how that unfolds, but it's not because of the talent or lack thereof talent for Tony Pollard. It's simply a business decision. I don't know if you can give him $10 million plus per year after this season, especially with the crop of players that are in this year's draft. And there's other guys on the roster like Malik Davis that could get involved in the picture. To me, it's just, I think it's just ludicrous that, you have to put him in the top 3 in my opinion. To me, he is the most explosive player on the offense. That's why I put him ahead of CeeDee Lamb. And there's two other parts to it as well. CeeDee Lamb was a first-round pick. Tony Pollard was a 4th-round pick. So based on my scale of him, we've gotten a better return on investment for Tony Pollard versus CeeDee Lamb, who I love both dearly.
I recognize this is a different question. But if you could only keep one, we played the Donovan Wilson, Jaron Kearse game. If you could only have one player on the Cowboys in 2023, CeeDee Lamb or Tony Pollard, who are you choosing?
Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb, just because of positional.
Right. I mean, I think that's part of, again, we all kind of approach this a little bit differently. Tony and I had really similar lists, so I think we kind of were similar. Brandon, Tom, you both, I don't know what you guys had for dinner or what's in the water around there. You guys, took some left turns where Tony and I did not. Tony, could you ever imagine ranking Tony? You had Tony Pollard very high, higher than Tom or I. But could you ever imagine ranking him higher than CeeDee Lamb?
No, and to be honest with you, to answer this question kind of in a roundabout way, like I knew that there would be some conversation between 10 and 4, but I thought 1, 2, and 3 was going to be chalk for all of us. To be honest with you, I thought Mike
you and I
would
had
be
the
1.
same 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah, so I really thought. I mean, this is what makes the roundtable awesome: is there is difference of opinion. But I really didn't think that the 1 through 3 was much of a debate. But that's why this is awesome.
Tom, I thought you were going to be similar to us in terms of like chalk. We had the same top 2, you, Tony, and I. You went Donovan at 3, which was a little bit, again, what's up? But still, CeeDee Lamb is number 2 on your list. I mean, Brandon's right. He was a 1st-round pick, but he was also this like, well, they don't really need him. And he inherited a horrible situation with Dak Prescott's, injury and then the Amari thing. And we talked so much about how the Cowboys unfairly put people and players in positions. We talked about Jalen Tolbert. We talked about Dalton Schultz. They put the world on CeeDee Lamb's shoulders last year, and he answered. Not every player in Cowboys franchise history, certainly over the last 25 years or whatever, has answered that call, but CeeDee Lamb did. He truly, totally became the alpha upon command, and that is a very impressive thing.
Yes, and he is the player, I think, one of the key ones they have to have, and they need a good season out of him. You look at the impact of the position, you look at how he stepped up when it was required. As you said, you look at how he had to deal with some adversity through the past couple seasons, and I just don't see how else you could put him. And to me, he was just you guys think I went off the reservation with my 3rd pick, but the first 2 just seem blatantly obvious.
Danny says he cannot wait to see who Tom, you, and Brandon have at number 1 and wonders whether or not it has been DiNucci. Again, a very interesting night. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this. Very obvious. Micah Parsons is the best Dallas Cowboys draft pick in the last 5, 10, 15 years, maybe the greatest Dallas Cowboys draft pick of all time, especially when you factor in that they traded back. I mean, they had 2 opportunities to take him, that they traded back with the Eagles of all teams. Rick has offered his list, says Micah, CeeDee, Diggs, Pollard, Tyler are my top 5. What can we say that hasn't been said about Micah Parsons? The only thing we can say is he hasn't won a Defensive Player of the Year award yet. That's his only. Maybe you believe he regressed a teeny tiny bit over the second half of last season, but regression for Micah Parsons is still, it's like Superman, flying without the cape. It just looks a little bit less cool. So
yeah, that's I think that pretty much says it. He's just the guy came in and took the NFL by storm, became an instant superstar?
This was the only one that we all had in the exact same spot. So Micah got all 4 first place votes. CD came closest with 3 second place votes, and there were several players who we each had at the same, or two of us had at the same spot. So that being said, let's take a look at everybody's list. And again, Brandon's says Donovan Wilson still. It is Cedric Wilson. I think I messed the columns up here. No, I did not. Yeah, my bad. But Brandon, you're there. And it does say Cedric Wilson instead of Donovan Wilson. So looking at the list, because we kind of just talked about it, so now that we have everybody's in front of us, the list will be updated in the article at the site where we'll put this episode as well. Your biggest takeaways, Tom, it could be about your list or any of ours.
That we did see most of it fairly similarly. We just had the order switched, and you kind of teased the fact. My honorable mention was Deron Bland. He was the guy that I was having to go back and forth with about Michael Gallup making the list. So
he was your honorable mention. I said Connor Williams was mine. We got a lot of comments. Kevin said, did nobody have Osa in the top 10? Tony, Brandon, would Osa have been your 11th player? Danny Phantom chimed in as well about this.
Not for me. No,
okay.
No.
I had him at 12.
Kevin says -5 for anyone with Armstrong that didn't have Osa. So that would be Brandon and Tony. Hey, it was a weird night. I feel like my picks were really chalk. I feel like nobody had anything to say about my list. So not trying to say like I'm the best, but I feel like my list was the most agreed upon. Like each of you kind of had a weird, what's going on, pick at some point in time. Tony, your biggest takeaway looking at everybody's list here in front of you.
Brandon's my guy. Shout out to Brandon, man.
Again, it's Donovan Wilson, not Cedric Wilson. But even still, Brandon, your list is it's unique. We'll say that. You know what I'm saying? Like your list is very unique. It stands on its own, and it's a necessary part of the group. You know what I'm saying?
You got that right. That's what I'm here for, everybody.
Okay, Brandon, since I think it's sort of agreed upon that you had we'll call it the most unique list. Who had the most unique pick that you think, like between Tom, Tony, and I, who had the pick that made you go, huh, that's weird? Was it CeeDee Lamb at 2? Or what was it from anybody else?
I think for me, if I had to nitpick a little bit, I would say maybe you, RJ. I just didn't think Leighton Vander Esch should have been in the top 5. That's just my opinion. I felt like he was a 6 through 10. I would have been okay with, from everybody else. But I think RJ, I got to call you out on that. I just can't put him in the top 5.
Brandon, I just noticed that you did not have Leighton on the list at all. How did I Brandon, wait a minute. So hold on. You did not have what? How do you not have Leighton Vander Esch on the list?
Because I said it earlier. I said
this isn't David Howman. I mean, this is Brandon Clements here. What's going on?
I guess Howman and I have talked too much. I guess it's kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. But no, for me it all came down to he had a great rookie year. He had a great 5th year, but everything in between wasn't up to snuff. Where the Cowboys were like, yeah, screw you and your 5th year option. Maybe if you get give us a cheaper price, maybe we'll bring it back. So that's kind of how I thought about it. Like he didn't earn his 5th year option, so that's why he wasn't on my list, no matter how good he did in 2022. That's kind of how I looked at Leighton. And I love Leighton. He's a great player.
That's a fair argument that he did not earn his 5th year option. There are only 2 other Cowboys players who did not earn their 5th year option since the 2011 CBA. Tom, who are they?
Oh, well, obviously Taco.
Right. Didn't even see the point of the team debating whether they should pick it up or not. So the other player had it declined.
I don't remember.
Tony, do you know the answer?
I'm blanking.
Brandon, do you know the answer?
Not off the top of my head.
It was Morris Claiborne, Cowboys first round pick in
Oh.
2012. But like Leighton, he did get a 1-year deal for the year that would have been his 5th-year option. So the team did play that correctly. He did not get another contract. We played we had the prerequisite as mentioned. Like, did he have a second contract? Leighton's technically on his 3rd. I mean, like if we're being literal here. So the fact that he escaped your list entirely, Brandon, is Rick has offered you -5 points for no Leighton Vander Esch.
Thank you, Rick.
This whole list was a matter of opinion. Now, for what it's worth, you all had a lot of points. This was a lot of fun. But the roundtable winner, it only felt right to make it Will McClay because this really did kind of like highlight, the great picks that the Cowboys have had. The fact that, I mean, no offense, Brandon, that like somebody could not have Leighton Vander Esch on the list, suggests that the Cowboys have done really well. The fact that CeeDee Lamb could not be in the top 2. I mean, again, we joked about the list being fun and unique, but the fact that you can kind of stretch these arguments one way or another shows the great job that the Dallas Cowboys have done in the drafting department. Have they had their fair share of misses? Absolutely, including Tom's guy, Kelvin Joseph, Nashawn Wright, et cetera, et cetera. But they have had a lot of hits over just the last 5 years alone.
Yeah, they absolutely have. I mean, the one that still bothers me to this day is Taco. Like TJ Watt is right there. I mean, I just think about it, and I have a lot of friends that are Steelers fans up in upstate New York, and it's they keep giving me a lot of flack for that. They're like, you guys missed on TJ Watt. Like, what's going on here? I wanted TJ Watt when I watched that draft. I wanted TJ Watt, and unfortunately, Taco was what he was. Can't get them all.
Brandon, Kevin says that he thinks Howman paid you to keep Leighton Vander Esch off of your list. It was not your fault. Danny says that you had the roundtable handed to him on a silver platter, but still doesn't get the dub. How do you feel, Tony? Are you upset that Will McClay won instead of you?
Nah, he deserves the respect, but it always hurts not to get the W, but I'll give it a Will.
Let's see, Tony. Let's all microanalyze Tony's list. So Micah Parsons at 1, CeeDee Lamb at 2, Trayvon Diggs at 3. I think Tony Pollard is too high on your list. Brandon, I know you disagree, but Tom, I mean, Tony Pollard at 4 ahead of Tyler Smith. Tom, shame Tony. Tom.
Are you still asking me, or are you just shaming Tony? I lost track.
Well, okay, so Tom, who had the best list? Let's play this game as we close out. Tom, whose list do you like the most that isn't yours? And everybody will answer. Again, if anyone tuned in late, Cedric Wilson should be Donovan Wilson under Brandon's list.
Yeah. God, I hate to say it, RJ, but yours is just kind of.
You hate to say it. I love you too, Tom.
Yeah, it's the kind of predictable names, though.
I mean, it's chalk. The lowest hanging fruit is the sweetest for a reason, Tom. Jeez. Okay, so Tom votes for me. Tony, whose list do you like the most that isn't yours?
I hate to say it again. RJ.
I am friends with all of you. You know what I mean? Like we can be civil and cool. So let's see here. Brandon, whose list do you like the most that is not your own?
I gotta go with Tom's, man. No offense, because you know what? Tom, the reason why I picked Tom is, you know what? He had the stones to put Donovan Wilson higher than me. So just off of that alone, Tom gets the nod for me.
Kevin says that I have the best list, so I appreciate you, Kevin. Watsamata says I like Tony's, would have been Tom, but oh my gosh, Dono at 3. Yeah, Tom. Again, Tom, you were playing it so like straight up, 17 pars, and then on 18, just like straight into the lake. Interesting kind of game here. Rick, Tony says that you have the best list. Danny Phantom ranked all of us and said that I was number 1, Tony 2, Tom 3, and 10 Brandon. The list closest to mine, which is very popular here, is Tony's. So my vote is that Tony had the best list that wasn't my own. I think the player we were the most harsh on collectively was probably Michael Gallup. I think that Michael is kind of the recipient of some real strong recency bias. I think the benefit of some recency bias is Donovan Wilson, clearly. I think the fact that Tyler Smith is so all over the place says that some people still aren't willing to totally and completely buy in. So, Tom, Kevin says that you killed your list with the Donovan ranking.
I will say that on Tyler Smith, that makes a lot of sense. He's just played 1 year in the league, so it makes a little sense that people are a little bit uncertain where he really should land on this.
Last question for real. What player not on this list do we expect to be a part of it next year? So when we do this next year, what player that we did not name do you think will be here? I've already taken the list off, so just kind of go off memory. A name we haven't said. I know the answer, the correct answer, but Brandon, you raised your hand first.
I think it's going to be Sam Williams. I think Sam's going to have
that's
a
my
monster
answer.
year.
Okay, so Dorrance Armstrong's going to have 8 sacks. Sam Williams is going to have 8 sacks. Micah Parsons is going to have 12 sacks. Like there's just going to be 1,000
sack
sacks.
party. Sack party.
Tony Catalina, who is your vote?
It was going to be Sam Williams, but I'll go with my second one, Israel Mukuamu.
Ooh,
okay, that's a solid list too. And again, if we play the like return on investment game, 6th round pick, you know, he has a lot of like kind of cash in that sense to sort of, you know, turn in here. Tom, who do you think that is not a part of this conversation tonight could be this time next year?
Oh, I was going to say Sam Williams too, but I like Tony's Mukuamu as a pick too. I think there's a chance he could really come up. And I'm not even sure he's going to be playing corner or safety. I think they're moving him to corner.
Just to be different, because Brandon, you took Sam Williams. Again, just so we have 4 names, I'll throw out Damone Clark. I think we could be sitting here being like, man, that pick, especially when you consider that we thought he was going to have a redshirt year and wasn't going to play, and there was all this question. That could be, you know, it could be what we wanted Jalen Smith to be in the overall. That ultimately it kind of was for a moment, then it wasn't. So wow, this was fun. Congratulations, I guess, to me for having the consensus best list. Tony, you were very close. Tom couldn't quite land the plane. Brandon, you're still flying in the sky. Don't know at what altitude, but you seem to be enjoying the ride, and that's what matters the most. So, Tony, I would like you to pick one of Tom and Brandon to make a sound for us to leave. Whoever you don't pick gets to pick the sound that the other person has to make.
It wouldn't be right if it wasn't Brandon.
Okay, so Tom, what sound would you like? What PG-13 sound, Tom, would you like Brandon to make as we leave here tonight?
A mentally disturbed Chihuahua.
Okay, let's kind of calm down a little bit here. Let's go with a different answer. Tom, please, something else.
Okay, a foghorn.
Oh.